All right, welcome everybody to this week's edition of Legal Tech Week, the show in which we talk about the top stories in legal tech and legal innovation. It is August 12th, 2022, and I am Bob Ambrogi. I'm the host, and I also write the blog Law Sites and have a podcast called Law Next. And very happy to have a guest panelist sitting in with us this week, Stephen Lerner from Law 360. So, Stephen, why don't you kick it off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hey, well, thanks, Bob. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Steve Lerner, senior reporter for Law 360. I write on Law 360 Pulse, our business of law wire, and specifically I cover legal tech, writing for our new legal tech wire that launched back in June.
Great. I'm able to read some of your stuff, but not everything because I'm not a Law 360 subscriber. But how does that work? Like some things are just up there in front of the paywall, right? And other stuff are behind it.
I mean, there are certain things I'm sure I have no idea how that works, but all of it's really good.
Okay. Well, like I clicked on your roundup today. You did a roundup, and that was that I could read. But
okay, good.
The story you wanted to talk about today, I could not read.
So. Sorry about that. I don't control.
That's okay. All right, Steve, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yep, Steve Embry.
Steve.
You're muted, I think.
No, I'm not. Have I made it? Can you hear me?
I'm muted.
You're muted. No, we can hear you, Joe.
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Steve.
Okay. Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, which is about legal technology, legal innovation, and whatever the hell else I want it to be about. And my experience with Law 360, it's kind of like these AirPods that we wear, that they sometimes work and they sometimes don't, and you never seem to have a clue when they're going to and when they're going to quit. And so I never know when I click on a Law 360 whether I'm going to get the article or I'm going to get one of these little messages that says you can subscribe, or better yet, you've reached your 3-article limit.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, that's law.com is that way too, right? It's like you never know, and then it's like this is like your last article. Then the next time you click, it's like it just goes,
here's your first article. Right?
Here's your first article.
But it always seems to. I seem to have used my last article right before the article that I really want to read.
You really want to read, right? Or the one we're going to talk about today. So now we're wondering if Joe can hear any of this. Joe, are you hearing any of us?
I am back. Yeah, no, it just it dropped both my microphone and my thing. Although I guess you heard a little bit of it. Yeah. Anyway, Joe Patrice from Above the Law, which has no paywall issues, so you can just read it. Like we try to keep it simple like that. Also, the Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast, and yeah, I'm here and able to hear you all. For now, anyway.
All right, and Greg Lambert says bribe a law librarian, he can get the article for you.
There we go.
And so we have a small panel this week. Some of our usual suspects are off here and there doing different things. So we will maybe have a little bit shorter of a show, or maybe we'll just ramble endlessly and go on for a long time. We'll see how it goes. And Steve, since you're new, I'm not going to make you go first, but maybe we'll have you go second. So why don't we start with the other Steve, just to avoid any confusion. By the way, other Steve, congratulations on becoming officially the chair of the Law Practice Management
Thank you.
Division of the American Bar Association.
Thank you.
We can say bad things about the ABA later in the show, but for now,
well, that's all right. I'll just have to be quiet. You know, it's funny. I woke up the day after I took the office and thought, holy cow, what have I gotten myself into? But in any event, hopefully I will manage to not dash the ship on the rocks during my year, but thank you for the well wishes. Well, I had written a post this week that many others had written about. It's been kind of in the news a lot, and that is the search warrant that was served on Facebook by a Nebraska detective that led to some additional felony charges against a mother who...
there was another search warrant this week?
No. Well, that's right. Now Now I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the search warrant basically obtained some direct messages between a mother and a daughter, where the mother had recommended, encouraged, instructed the daughter to get anti-abortion pills, which the daughter took, and I guess had an abortion, although that's probably an allegation. After the 20 weeks or 24-week period in Nebraska had expired. And, the thing that struck me about that, it was, first of all, the warrant was actually served before the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And it was, there were charges pending against the mother and the daughter even before Roe versus Wade was overturned. So it's a little bit unusual. And the search warrant didn't mention abortion and so on and so forth. But what struck me as really odd about that is the continued sort of gap between what we all think might be private and what really is private. There was, I listen every week to Leo Laporte's Tech Guy podcast, and one of the things he was talking about this week was all our devices that spew out data from Alexa, from Nest doorbells to your car, to your cell phone. And there's, all this data generated by Internet of Things devices that is all going someplace that we all have basically said, it's not ours, you can have it, do what you will with it. And yet that could have enormous implications that, we don't even think about, such as the thing that happened to the Nebraska mother and daughter. And I'm sure if you asked them when they were sending those direct messages, you really think that maybe you might not do that, the government might read them someday. I'm sure they say, no, that never would happen. No. But it is happening. And I think it's going to continue to happen because we really, to the extent we had any right of privacy, we've given it up, and it could have implications, all over the place. You want to get car insurance, and your application might be denied because the insurance company has looked up your records from your automobile that are kept digitally someplace, and you don't count. Or voting rights, we've looked up, you don't seem to have been in the state long enough, or what have you. And so there's just plenty of opportunity for mischief, abuse, and God help you if you were to ever click on the wrong site someday that could get you into all sorts of trouble. So I just thought it was another sort of example of how we are going down this rabbit hole of the end of privacy as we've known it. And really sort of, I think I've said in the article, it's, not only is Big Brother watching us, we don't even appreciate the fact that he is all the time. So, but anyway, it got a lot of national attention. But I think to me, the repercussions were not just in the abortion debate, which is why it got so much attention, but for all the other things that could spin from all of this.
Well, it's interesting. We had a story on this too, but I also thought this is similar to, this ties in with the acquisition of Roomba that Amazon just pulled off, which, it's nice to own self-running vacuums, but it's even nicer to be given the data of exactly where you have your couch and everything, if you're trying to build a system that recommends when you want to buy a new couch, which if you're Ed Whalen, it helps you get maps of people's floor plans so that you can criticize them. I don't know if anybody remembers that little controversy. Anyway, that little legal controversy. But yeah, no, there is an interesting element to which we benefit from having this data be crunched, but also there are downsides to it. And the challenge coming forward is that nobody seems to be very interested at a regulatory level in navigating between the two extremes. There's a bunch of people who want to make it so that there's no data shared anywhere, and a bunch of people who wish for the wild, wild west of, Facebook narking on you for violating state laws. There needs to be some sort of effort to come up with some kind of nuance that allows us to be recommended that we might want to buy a new chair, and also doesn't turn us over for talking about reproductive health. That's unfortunately I guess maybe I've encapsulated the problem with the entire country. Just writ large, there is no interest in forming some sort of a nuanced policy answer to this right now.
Nuance.
Yeah.
What's that? The other thing I thought was
so
interesting
bad.
about it was the Facebook response. That Facebook said, well, we didn't know this had anything to do with abortion. And, when we get things like this, sometimes we'll fight them, and, sometimes we won't. And then, that's just up to us. Screw you. So,
well, but I
you
thought,
you don't even have, like you don't even know whether your person that you've given all this stuff to is going to fight for you or, turn you over.
I mean, a lot of these companies will have a policy that they may not oppose the subpoena directly, but I think Google, for example, I think its policy is that it's going to at least notify you that the government has come asking for your data and give you the opportunity to contest it, even if they're not going to contest it. Although I think often they'll contest it. It seems from your story that Facebook just here you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Well, and if it had been couched in terms of pertaining to the abortion issue, maybe their response would have been different. I don't know. Although I'm not sure that has any sort of basis, other than their political or moral view of abortion, maybe. But I mean, murder, robbery. I mean, where do you sort of say we're going to do this or we're not going to do this? And, I think Joe's right. I mean, we have no real sort of standard that we can point to. The other thing I thought was, a lot of people typically response will be, well, I've never done anything that I'm ashamed of, and I don't mind if somebody looks at my stuff. And whenever I hear that, I say, well, fine, just hand me your cell phone. Let me kind of take a look what you got in there. I'd be kind of interested. Well, I don't want to do that. Right. So right. I was also reminded of the former President Trump's, position that, hey, if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't need the Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination, which he's now rethought just a bit.
He seems to have come around on that, which I for one applaud people learning more about the Constitution. Right. And it took him some years, but he's come around, and we should all applaud this new civic-minded version.
Yeah.
Bob, to your point about Facebook, or at least you said Google's rule that they will at least alert you if law enforcement is after your data. A lot of these big tech companies share your data, with other private parties, and if they share that data with a private party, there's nothing stopping that other company from doing that. So even if Google won't do that, there's nothing stopping the other company that they're going to share the data with from doing that.
Yeah, right. But in theory, Google's anonymizing it when it's sharing it. I mean, I know that's kind of a fallacy to some extent, but at least they're anonymous. I mean, they're not saying here are the sites, Bob Ambrogi surfed. They're saying here are collectively, I don't know, data on sites that were surfed and that sort of thing. And I remember hearing somebody had a book out a couple of years ago where he kind of talked about how that was a fallacy, how if you really go in and look at sort of searches on Google, you can start to identify patterns and you can start to figure out almost down to an individual level or a community level or something who's searching for what, and and really dig down into that. But still, at least there's this facade.
We like to think that the third parties can't get or use specific information about each of us, but I'm not terribly optimistic that that's the case. And even as you say, Bob, I mean, you could filter it down to 3 houses on Landmark Drive, which is where I live. So Okay, well, that's pretty close. Now we just kind of look at the other factors, and we can pretty well figure out that it's Embry that did this, and Embry ain't getting no loan now.
Yeah, somebody on Landmark Drive's been doing a lot of mail order bourbon. I don't know what
Right.
it is, but
Yeah, there's 3 houses on Landmark, and only one of them seems to order bourbon periodically.
I highly doubt. I highly doubt that you're the only one in Kentucky ordering bourbon.
Yeah, well, that's probably a good bet. Yeah, or even the 3 houses on Landmark.
Right.
yeah. Oh well, it is scary though. I mean, this is where the old fogey in me comes out because I mean, I'm just like old enough to remember when, you know, you could drive somewhere and nobody would know where you were. Nobody could
Yeah.
track your GPS data or your credit card usage or know where your cell phone is and ping your cell phone. And, it's just like a whole different era of that we live in. But
Well,
You could
and
hike
trade
the
off.
hike.
we had that discussion maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago on the show, and Nikki was postulating the chance that you would be stopped at the state line by an officer who wanted to know why you were going to Illinois from Kentucky, and could it be you're getting an abortion or what have you. But the truth is, you don't have to have somebody stopping you at the state line, obviously, from what happened in Nebraska. You just do a little search, serve a warrant, and you figure out how many times somebody has driven across the state line and win.
Yeah, I mean these cars at this point have GPS in them that's trackable. So
I mean, we're not even at the point, not to get too far off topic, we're not even at the point where you have these truly smart cars that are so intelligent. They know how much coffee you have in your mug, where's the nearest coffee shop you can go to. We're not there yet, but when that happens, privacy goes out the window.
yeah,
Yeah.
it'll probably be one of those features you have to pay extra for, though,
Right.
like the seat warmers.
Heated seats, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, Steve, now we've given you a chance to warm up and
other-
get
other
acclimated.
Steve?
Get acclimated here. So now I will turn to you and see what story did you want to talk about this week?
Yeah, it was a busy week. There were 7 acquisitions, at least in legal tech. I could have picked any one of them. I decided to go with the Mitratech acquisition this week. I thought there were some intriguing aspects of that one that are different from the others, but they also reflect a larger trend. So just to go over the Mitratech thing real quick, it acquired this company called Talent Reef this week. They're in the talent management, the recruiting space. It's the second acquisition for Mitratech recently that's in that human resources space. And so to me, this acquisition is a lot bigger than just Mitratech. I mean, Mitratech makes a lot of acquisitions. That's not a surprise. I think the bigger issue is sort of this convergence we're seeing between the legal profession and compliance and risk and human resources. It's also not the only legal tech company to go after a human resources company and acquire them. In fact, there was another one this week. Adderant did the same thing with VI Global. So I think you're seeing this convergence between legal and HR that I think is really interesting given the type of work that both departments tend to do. But I also think there's another reason why they're going after these types of companies. I do think that there has to be some concern that in the legal profession, as far as technology is concerned, that has the well dried up. Can you keep going after that same market over and over again with the same type of products, even if you're being innovative? You might have to reach new verticals that are adjacent to legal. HR fits that. This week, you had a few legal tech companies that were public that released data, financial data about how they're doing. And at least 2 of them are not doing so well. I won't mention their names, but in terms of their revenues, going backwards. One of them just had an acquisition earlier this year, so I would have expected their revenue to go up, not down. And so maybe the legal well is sort of drying when it comes to technology. And a lot of these companies are realizing, hey, we have to kind of go to some of these other departments, adjacent departments that work with legal, go after them. And so, we've seen that, like I said, with Adderant and Mitratech this week. They did that. And even last week where Deal, which is a compliance payroll company, they bought LegalPad, which is a company that specializes in visas. So I think there is this interesting convergence that's coming up between legal and HR. I don't know if the financial reasons are the thing that's driving it, but I do think it's an interesting aspect of it.
So, from what I was able to gather from this acquisition, and so I also didn't see your exact story about it, but I saw press releases around it. So, this acquisition, it's like, if I get this right, the company does like hourly, like it almost seems like it does like gig economy tracking of like, right?
Yeah, they specialize in the hourly workers, part-time or full-time. So it's not meant to go after I guess the 9 to 5 crowd. These are meant to go after more so the hourly crowd.
Yeah, well, but so that was my takeaway when I saw that, was that this has this kind of plays into not just that you need that these legal companies need to go into other verticals, but also that they potentially that they see the future being very, temp lawyerish, that they see the future of whether, we've had this with like the alternative legal providers before, but like maybe they're seeing the idea that where we're going to start going is with more contract attorney gigs, more working with temporary lawyers and so on, post-pandemic folks that might have resigned from firms but are still out there maintaining their license, and that might be the future of tracking some of this stuff, which makes it both an HR vertical but still back into legal, if that's where you think a lot of this legal work is going to start going.
It absolutely could go that way, especially if that's how it evolves.
But I think your point about the well-running dry is an interesting one. We actually, I think just last week, we were talking about that on this show. We were talking about it recently, if not last week. This idea that, you're seeing this with some of the contract life cycle management companies or contract drafting companies or otherwise that had previously focused their sales efforts on the legal department, and that are now talking much more about being this holistic solution for the entire enterprise, and talking more about orienting their sales toward procurement or toward sales staff, or other parts of a business. And again, you have to kind of think that's because it's a finite, corporate legal is a finite market, and there's a lot of people going after that market. And to the extent that you can position your product as something that is more of an enterprise-wide product, then you've that much more expanded your potential market for selling it. So that may be a little bit of what's going on here too.
Yeah, well, and that's of course the model that the Big Four has been sort of pushing out there for some time. Is we're not going to provide legal advice, wink wink nod nod, but we can help you with everything else, including preventing you from ever needing legal advice. So it's actually, I think a pretty good idea to reach back further into the organization and be able to provide the kind of advice that, reduces the need for reliance on lawyers themselves.
Yeah. I also, just a side note, I probably shouldn't even make a side note, but it was just funny. You were talking about how a couple of companies reported, diminished growth this year, or diminished revenues this year. And
go ahead and name them.
Well, no, I was on a call this morning with a company. I just thought it was funny because they were talking about their phenomenal growth this year and how they had seen X percentage of growth this year, but the funny thing was they were just founded this year. So well, what is that percentage of zero? I mean, what is that mean?
Infinite growth. That is infinite growth right there, friends.
So yeah, they're all bragging about their growth, but you got to put it in context for sure.
Exactly.
Even adjusted for inflation, that's infinite.
Yeah, right. It was, I mean, they legitimately had, I hate to kind of use it because they had legitimately had, in fact, grown really quickly this year, but the way they had positioned it was like,
didn't exist
the
last
math
year.
doesn't work on that. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, let's see. All right. Well, time to talk about chips and brains, I think.
Sure.
Because actually, Joe, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to talk about it?
Sure. Well, let's both talk about it. I mean,
All
I
right.
don't think there's a reason we should be provincial about it. So yeah, no, there was a study that was recently put out, and you can give a little bit more of the details of it. This wasn't really my story. It was Catherine Rubino's here at Above the Law. But a study recently came out that suggested that the billable hour will give way to the billable attention unit. And what the attention unit is after they implant chips in the brains of lawyers, it will detect when you're thinking about the case and not thinking about the case, and bill based on that. Totally normal stuff.
Yeah.
Wait. You mean you said when they implant the chip? I thought they did that in
right.
first week of law school.
Yeah. So, I mean, my takeaway on this, my thought on it was this is obviously kind of crazy. But also, we've had the data capability to price out most legal transactions. It's not like a long-running litigation, but lots of transactional work. We've had the data to be able to make a profit maximizing within reason flat fee for years. We've had the ability to do this for a long time, and clients would love us to do this, and we still really haven't done it in a widespread manner, which says to me that no matter what clients may want, we're never going to do something like this because this is insane. And maybe the technology comes to pass. Probably. I mean, I don't know. Eventually, maybe it will. Maybe the phones that we are telling the state of Nebraska about all that we're thinking will be able to do this. But we're not gonna agree to do this as a profession. That's ridiculous.
No, of course not. But we'll take the COVID tests. I mean, the COVID shots, and we know what's in those. So,
I would push back a little bit, Joe, on your statement that clients really want it. Some clients probably do, but my experience had been particularly with larger corporate clients with in-house legal is they say, oh yeah, that would be a really good idea, but we don't want to do that because you may make too much money that way, or you might not want to work so hard. I mean, and so there's this natural inertia that many in-house legal departments that I always found, because I would propose it over and over again, having done done a few of them many years ago, and it was always, that's a really great idea, but we're not sure we want to do that. We like that measurement of the billable hour too much, which is folly, but it's there. And of course, lawyers never change. Whether you're in-house lawyer or an outside lawyer, you don't like to change what you've been doing.
Yeah, but so in fairness to the author, I mean, the article was about more than just this idea of billable units of attention. The whole point of the idea was that neurotechnology is a thing that people there is currently already technology in which either chips are being implanted in brains for health reasons, or where people are able to use devices in which they're able to use their thoughts to control certain things. Drones is an example that's given here. And although we're still in the nascent stages of this technology, lawyers should be thinking about the potential implications, both good and bad. This was actually commissioned by the Law Society of England and Wales, and written by somebody who is a professor, the assistant deputy director of the Sydney Institute of Criminology at the University of Sydney Law School. So it's not kind of an off the wall study. And I mean, the kind of the point is he's saying, there could be implications for, criminal law, for example. I mean, he talks about the idea of how do you prove criminal intent, or what's required to prove criminal intent if somebody's able to do something just by thinking about it. I mean, I was thinking, was it Jimmy Carter who said, if I
lust it in my heart.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was the line, I think.
but I mean, he talks about the example of maybe somebody who's able to, through their thoughts, post revenge porn in a jurisdiction in which revenge porn is a criminal act. Have they committed a criminal act? I mean, probably, but the law doesn't really address that.
Mens rea
yeah.
versus actus rea.
Yeah, okay. But then he talks about just implications again for the legal profession, not just the billable hour thing, but what about if we get to the point where we're able to start inserting, having neurotechnologically enhanced mental capabilities. Will lawyers be using chip implants to essentially combine the power of artificial intelligence technology with their own human capabilities to create a sort of a super lawyer? And if that ever happens, do you get to the point where it could arguably be malpractice for a lawyer not to implant a chip in their brain?
For the record, I wanted it to be noted that Bob said that first. It was not me. And I was thinking as you
yeah,
were
but you were the
talking,
one who set up the chip implant clinic in your backyard. So
I was thinking as you were talking, we already have, and I know that some companies actually use, they follow the number of keystrokes that you make to make sure that you're at your computer a certain amount of time and so on and so forth. And, while implanting chips in your brain to monitor things like that is a little far-fetched, it would not be so far-fetched for somebody to wear a band, to put a band to monitor things like that. That technology may not be that far away. And so it just strikes me as a little icky to think back to the Big Brother is always watching. I mean, I was told by somebody that their computer was watching their keystrokes to make sure they were working. Just like, yeah. I don't know about that.
Given the pace of change in legal, I'm sure every other industry would basically start using this before lawyers. So I don't think the legal industry has anything to worry about anytime soon.
Well, but what about the bar exam? Wasn't this a thing at the bar exam that they were monitoring your? Yeah.
And it was such a disaster that they immediately went back to these to doing it in person without trying to, because with a lot of stuff post pandemic, a lot of industries went with like, hey, maybe we can do a lot of things over Zoom and remotely. The bar exam took 1 second of what was going on with that keystroke monitoring stuff and was like, you know what, let's go back to person. The correct answer is to get rid of the bar exam altogether, but that's a whole other conversation.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I guess that, the bottom line here is I think it's legitimate to say, let's start thinking about this stuff. And I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe we don't need to be thinking about it. But
yeah, I don't think. It's so hard for me to believe that there will ever be momentum for this kind of an idea. It just gets a little. But it brings us back to the theme from the earlier conversation. If this were to happen, and you were able to put implants in to determine if you had mens rea, yada, yada, in some case, we would need nuanced regulations rather than Wild West versus banning it. We would need something in between. And I don't see that happening.
It's not going to happen.
All right. Well, that was technically my story because I wrote about it, but Joe thought about it first and implanted the idea of it in my brain. So that means I get to give another story. And besides, we've got time to fill here. But not to say anything bad about the American Bar Association, since we have one of its top officers sitting here on the panel here today. But they did this thing this week at their annual meeting, which just so perfectly typifies the American Bar Association, I think, which is that the ABA House of Delegates, which is of course the policy-making body, adopted this resolution 402, which was a reaffirmation of a 22-year-old resolution, which is basically a screed against non-lawyers being able to have any ownership interest in law firms, and in saying that any kind of ownership by non-lawyers is, quote, inconsistent with the core values of the legal profession. And this was a resolution that was put forth by the bars of Illinois, New York, solo and small firm practice, another entity. And I guess at the House of Delegates meeting, Steve, I don't know if you were at any of this, or I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but there was an amendment put forward, I think, to kind of give a nod to the fact that in 2020, the ABA had adopted a different resolution, sort of endorsing innovation in law, but again, sort of as long as it didn't do anything to interfere with Rule 5.4 and the ownership stuff. And so they adopted this resolution. They amended this resolution this week to also include sort of a reminder about the other resolution they adopted in 2020 in favor of innovation in a way. So, I mean, basically, I don't know what they really thought they were doing, but I think the bottom line is a clear statement from the ABA that we are not in any way, I say, not speaking for myself, but this is the ABA talking, that they are not in any way going to endorse this idea of non-lawyer ownership or non-lawyer investment in law practices. And I think that's really too bad, because I think that's where the future is headed. And I think that's just another indication the ABA is not able to, sort of not relevant really to where we are right now in this conversation.
I have no comment. I mean, I have lots of thoughts, but I have no comment. And other than to say, the ABA is composed of many different voices, so it's and many different with many different perspectives. So change is sometimes hard. But I was not part of it. I'm not, and I'm not in the board of governors, even as chair of the law practice division. That I'm not part of that. So I all I know is the same thing Bob, was what I read about.
Look, I've got more consistent messaging while dating. We need you to innovate, but in the most traditional possible way. I understand it though, because the problem, and this goes. You know what? I've determined the theme for this episode is the need for nuance. The problem right now, of course, is there's a binomial legal profession. We know that from salaries, but we also know there's a binomial legal profession as far as who it's serving. And there are folks at the bottom who are crying out for, we need non-lawyer ownership so that there's some access to justice down here. And that is being balanced against a bunch of folks who are like, but if we allow that to happen, then we're going to lose to the big four at the top. The big four isn't the one who's going to go out and help out people who need appearances in family court. But because people at the top are scared of that, we're not going to have an answer down here. It is incredibly problematic that these two forces are resulting in doing nothing. But, that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, personally, I would do something to try to resolve it on the other end so that people who may not be, let's put it this way, people who may not be lawyers can get some sort of a certification that makes them like a lawyer, so that those folks could do that access to justice part, which would be a different job than the big four doing their big four-ish stuff. But no one wants to craft that very tailored discussion. Or have those kind of special certification programs, but that would require something akin to getting rid of the bar exam and replacing it with certain certifications where people, to do this X job that has an access to justice purpose, you don't need a law degree, but you need to pass this test. Or if you have a law degree, you can pass this X test and get this other benefit. But that kind of regulation, that kind of nuanced, specific, specialist general, as opposed to generalist bar exam sort of world, is just not anything anybody wants to do. So instead, what we're going to do is screw over the access to justice people to avoid losing to Deloitte.
And I will have to say, I mean, I don't, this is going to sound like I'm defending the ABA, and to some extent, I guess I am. But, you know, short of Utah and what Arizona, no state has been able to push this ball over the line, including California, that, you know, as Bob and I wrote about, you know, the let's punt it to the legislature. No, it's the courts. No, it's the lawyers. No, it's, well, whoever it is, we're not doing it. So it's just, you know, I mean, it's, for this profession, as we've seen over and over again in every context, any sort of change is just almost impossible. So,
but it's because we can't push it over to the line. Because we have organizations like the ABA and the sort of traditional bars doing everything in their power to block it, and yet everybody who's trying to block it seems to have no other answers or solutions for what to do about it. Even when you look at the ABA's own reports on the access to justice crisis, they talk about the need. I mean, what was the one they did a few years ago? Blanking on their name of that report, but they did an exhaustive report on the future of legal services just a few years ago, and that report talked about the need for, you know, alternative forms of providing legal services, and cited the success of some of these experiments and programs. But yet, when push comes to shove, they're just not able to give up their monopoly. They're so threatened by it. And this isn't about the big four. I mean, the big four don't serve this population and never will. They're going to compete against other big law firms, but they're not going to come in and take away solo small firm practices and that sort of thing. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
so I think one of the interesting components of this story is just, I think it was the point about how slow these sandbox seem to be setting up. I spoke to a legal tech company last year that is in the personal injury space. They were going as far as setting up their own law firms in different states. I asked them, well, why not join the sandboxes you have in Utah? Why not join the Arizona licensing program? And they flat out told me, if we went the sandbox route, it would take 50 years, quite frankly, to go to all these states, because that's the pace at which it's moving. I don't know if the ABA's provision is necessarily causing that. I think there are deeper issues here that you brought up, but the pace of it has just been pretty slow.
Yeah, that's a really legitimate point, and yeah, part of it is just the bureaucracy around it. I mean, part of it is, you know, in Utah, I mean, it is a limited market. I mean, Utah is not a huge state in population, and there's only so many opportunities there for some of these companies to set up and have gain any kind of traction. So it really has to be for companies that are looking to do something that's pretty experimental, or that, you know, that they're good with the sort of experimenting with a smaller potential market or audience, and then if it works, take the model somewhere else. But no, that's a good point. I'd also say, to Steve's point early on, that, you know, I understand. I even said this on Twitter this week, that, I mean, there are a lot of really good people, and I mean, you know, almost everybody in the ABA is a good person. But I mean, there are people who are well-meaning on this issue and well-intentioned on this issue, and I know there are a lot of people within the ABA who are strong proponents of some of these kinds of innovations, and you know, you can't sort of sweep too broad a brush in talking about the ABA, but still, this is the organization's officially adopted policy that represents that of the entire organization, and the fact that they felt that in 2022 they needed to restate something they adopted 22 years ago, given how much the world has changed in 22 years, tells you something.
Hey, you know what I'd prefer you not say? That was 22 years ago. Because 22 years ago was like 1978 in my mind, and let's just like leave it at that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
if it was
Wait till you
78
get
in
to,
your
wait till you
mind,
get to
it
be
was like,
our age.
yeah, it's like 1936 in my mind. Anyway, all right. And let's see. In other news, Steve got his ILTA press pass, so we're excited about that.
Yay.
The blacklist.
Off the blacklist. Steve Lerner, are you going to ILTA?
Yep, going there should be fun. I haven't been to DC in 25 years, which I guess that's like 1972 in my mind too.
Yeah.
And I'm excited. Should be fun.
Where are you based? I don't even know where you're based.
New York City.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well,
In fairness, you still won't have been to DC because National Harbor is nothing like DC. But
Yeah, but
And
I'm
it's in
stopping
Maryland,
off on
right?
DC on the way there because I haven't been there in quite a while. But you're absolutely right. It's very different.
yeah, no. But it does have two things I'm looking forward to for those who may be going to National Harbor for the IltaCon game. It has, unless it's closed since the last time we've been there, it has a Nando's chicken, which is an amazing place, which exists internationally and only in a few locations in the US, but one of them is down the street from the location of the conference. And the other thing it has down there is if it's still open, they had a whole store dedicated to hot sauces, which it was like a block and over. And they also have a casino, but that's a whole other thing.
best thing about National Harbor is it's across the river from Alexandria, and you can just get out of National Harbor and go to Alexandria and hang around over there.
See, what's weird is I never actually, I once stayed in Alexandria. I never really had a good time there. I was always like, yeah.
Well, I mean, good. It's not a good time place. I mean, it's quaint, and you can get some nice restaurants, and
Yeah, I guess that's fair. I remember Ellie Mistal and I were driving out of Alexandria, and he was blasting Miss Saigon's soundtrack on the radio of the car that he was driving, and people were looking at us, and I was like, not me. Yeah.
all right. And inquiring minds in the audience want to know what's the secret to getting a press pass. Who did you bribe, Steve?
Don't know. If I knew the secret, I would have applied it long ago.
Yeah. No, I think they seem to be have a pretty more liberal policy this time. I haven't heard of anybody other than the fact that it took Steve a while to get one, which I'm not sure why that is. And it was a sort of a cryptic start to the way they were handing them out, I think. But I don't think we haven't had any problems getting press passes, have we, other than delays around them?
And I will have to say, in ILTA's defense, I did not apply to get one until recently. So it's not like I was delayed for an extremely long period of time.
Right.
But,
we did have an exchange where you said to me, "I haven't gotten a press pass," and I said, "Have you asked?" And you said, "No."
Yeah.
I thought maybe they'd give me one because without asking. I don't know.
It's
It's the chip thing.
Well, in fairness to Steve, in the past, they have reached out before we even have asked. Like in the past, we get the email being like, we've invited you to whatever, which was the thing that we got during the COVID year where I got it and was like, oh, it says it's going to be virtual. And then I found out in real time on this very show that no, some of you got live passes and some didn't. But so you didn't used to have to ask. Now you do. And there you go.
Well, I will say, since Joshua Lennon's in the audience today, if you want a object lesson in how to handle media passes, look at CleoCon, I think, because they are super professional about it. They reach out in advance. They've already provided their full packet of everything you need to know as a reporter covering. ask, do you want a podcast table? Yes, I want a podcast table. I mean, it's, it's like they're anticipating everything I might want to ask.
It's unbelievable how well it's been run. And actually, I had an issue where my travel itinerary bit that was proposed to me had a little issue with it, and I immediately saw it, and it was immediately fixed. Like, Clio is so on top of everything; it's amazing.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, let's see. Is there anything else we should talk about? I mean, we could talk about the. There was also another Lerner acquisition this week.
Oh wait, Lerner bought somebody? No kidding.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
I think it was a third of the year.
Was it a day that ended in Y?
No, but it's been like since January. It's been a while. It's been like a little dry spell for them.
So for those who don't know, and a lot of the audience does know me, our little joke whenever I run into people from Lerner is to speak a little loudly about my cloud native, machine learning enabled, FedRAMP certified data lake that's metaverse capable, and just like saying, like, if you want help with your ERISA workflow, and because I wonder if maybe Lerner will get confused in all the other things that they're buying and maybe give me a few $1 million on the side. I don't know. Like, I'm still, it hasn't worked yet, but I'm pretty confident with Lerner's buying frenzy that I can get in there.
They haven't given you the $1 million on the side yet?
Not yet. No. No, so far they've been pretty good about making sure. Yeah. No, they're pretty sure about vetting their buys.
Good. All right. Anyway, they did. I don't know. Anything else we should talk about? Any other news? Steve, anything else interested you this week? Steve 2, Steve 1, Steve Lerner?
I'm not sure. It's been a pretty busy week. The ABA meeting was still pretty big. We talked about that. The 7 acquisitions were going into that. Those are kind of the big ones.
Yeah, good. All right. Then we can give people a few more minutes of their time back. And we managed to make it almost through the hour with just 4 of us. So that's good. And we'll be back. We will probably be back next week. And then that'll be our pre-ILTA show, I guess. And then we can do, I wonder if we should no, ILTA will be over by the following Friday, so we can decompress at that point. All right, well, thanks everybody, and I hope everybody has a great weekend, and see you next week.
So long.
See ya.